I'm personally very happy.
Per Holmqvist.
I'm very happy to sit down as well for a while. And let's start. And just to get acquainted to you all, Corina, maybe start with you. Quick intro.
Okay, good morning for those of you who haven't seen me yesterday. I'm from Romania. I've been in the world of testing for the past 15 years or so. I'm mostly doing automation these days. I'm also a QA lead, so I'm involved in all kinds of interesting things. I've also worked in interesting domains like aviation or online gaming or different various aspects. And I'm mostly focused on Selenium automation these days. So that's me in a nutshell.
Okay, hi, I'm Lars, also somewhat of a regular here, but not for the last 5 years. I'm from Malmö. I've been in testing since 2007, and I usually prefer to working with embedded software because I like the sensors part of stuff and so on, and the whole chain. But lately, everything has become more cloud, so I'm also currently working on that and public transportation. Try to work in industries I feel aligned with. I'll hold there.
Cool. Mic check?
Check, check.
Check, check, check.
Well, there you go. Testing.
Yeah.
There we go. Live in action. Not sure if... Yeah, there we go. My name is Martijn Goossens. I'm here for the first time, so thanks for having me. I did a tutorial on Tuesday, so I haven't been on this stage yet. Happy to join with you. I've been in QA also over 15 years. I've been doing Agile for roughly around the same time. In interesting domains like e-commerce, fintech, I've done manual testing, test automation, and I'm what they call a consultant nowadays. So.
Okay, we'll get to the jokes later.
Yeah, sorry.
And I'm Kaspar, your panel host for the day, and for my professional background. I used to be in testing for quite a few years, and in software development as well in general, but now I have turned to the dark side. I work in banking and finance and on product management. So I have so many questions. So let's start with the opening question. And the opening question is actually very, very simple. Now, COVID is over. And what has happened in testing in the meanwhile? So what has changed? So whoever wants to go first? You see, we have a lot of initiative. There you go, Lars.
Well, something that has changed with COVID is that a lot more people are working remotely. And so there's partly that the teams are splitting up in a way so that you don't have co-location so much of people. So the way people are working is one thing, I guess. So that also means that there's more of you have more time on your own, and you can if people are going to be able to work from home, they have more equipment at home, and that leaves you more time with the thing in itself. So testing is more a separate thing, and then you can connect with the developer for just the things you want, and there's not so much people are bugging you all the time. It's more time for longer sessions of, wait a minute, I have to think about this, and nobody's battering you with other questions, so you can actually go deeper and focus on something. Something I felt at least. But also that the technologies we're looking for is also different, right? So we want to have more remote work, and people want to be able to they have started enjoying the remote stuff. So we want to have more telepresence and good cameras and so on. But that's also people want to monitor things more. So the DevOps and maybe be able to see monitoring of things and see what you can get from that without actually being present per places. I think that's also going to be a bigger thing that's growing. And it happened during COVID, but then people say, hey, that's the thing we kind of like. And then it will keep rolling.
Thank you, Lars. So what I take away from here is that you can actually get some work done.
Some focused work. Yeah, I could do that before too, but sometimes you want to sit next to your developers as well, pick their brain about something. Hey, wait a minute, this thing. But sometimes you if you're there too much and you take it for granted, they ask you questions all the time and you can't actually get any focus work done. It's what I think.
Thanks, Lars. Corina, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I agree with everything that was said up to now. I think one thing that has changed is that now we can actually work with people from other parts of the world we were never able to work with, as long as our time zones allow that, of course. So for example, for the past 2 years, I've been in mixed teams where we were probably on 3 different continents, and we managed to get a product out with great quality just by working together, even though we were in different locations. One thing that there's different aspects here. One of them is like, do you like people? Do you like to be around people? Because if you do, you're a bit solitary now that you're working from home, if you are. Otherwise, you're fine. You're just happy to be at home, and you're happy that nobody's changing the setting on your AC machine, if you know what I mean, because I was one of the people who suffered from that. So yeah, this is one of the things. And as Lars said, you are able to focus more on what you are doing, and you are able to be more productive probably, and to work probably in a more enjoyable environment in some cases than you would at work, because you're at home, you have all your little things around you, so it's much more pleasant, Yeah, I think that's a cat, right? All right, so somebody has cats, somebody has dogs, I'm with the dogs, so yeah. And I think the industry has learned that you don't necessarily have to be in the office in order to produce something, to get a product out the door. Because we have the infrastructure, we have everything at our disposal, and we can work from anywhere and we can achieve the same results. So we don't necessarily have to be all together, all stuck there, all confined to a certain program from 9 to 5 or something like that. We can actually be more flexible, and so people are happier. That's weird because we were in the pandemic and it was a very sad period, but we're a bit happier in terms of how we manage to do our work if we have the option to work from home as well.
So it's the independence of choice
Yes.
which makes people happy in your eyes.
Yes,
Okay.
I think
I want to bounce off that too, because the thing, like, people really wanted you to get back into the office as soon as possible. They're like, we're going to shut down just temporarily. But then, because I think there was a trust issue, like, no, we have to see that you're actually working and like sitting there so that you're productive. But then they realized, like, when people were home, they couldn't monitor them, and still things got, like, people actually were still caring to produce things and working in teams. So I think they have realized that they can trust people in tech, like the workers, more testing as well as developers. So we do things.
That's very interesting because I hear you're starting to trust the developers a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yes, actually, yes. Because
Some time thinking, I see.
well, they don't feel they have to produce something that they can show for the managers. Oh, see, I did this thing. So actually, like, no, wait, this might be broken. Yeah, it is. And they come to us. It's like, I think I want, like, they can be more upfront, because also they don't have to tell everyone in an open office. They can just, talk to me in Slack or maybe have a huddle.
And
Thanks, Lars. Martin,
yeah,
your
well,
turn.
it's interesting that you say that it's easy to approach each other on a huddle and find each other on the many communication devices or media that have now also been improved since it was necessary because of the COVID lockdowns. But I also noticed that a lot of people still like their individual work. And the workshop that we did on Tuesday was still about collaboration. And I still notice that people are in need to do that collaboration to get most of their requirements work done, for example, to look at their sprint retrospectives, improve their way of working. So I still see a lot of benefit, even if you are a more introvert person, to
Yes.
get collaboration going.
But it's self-organized. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not top-down.
No, that's true. So I'm a big fan of working from home, because then finally I have less distractions, people pulling my sleeve for some answers. So I deeply appreciate the focus time that we're getting. But I also still am an advocate for getting back to the office at least once every 2 weeks. For example, to kick off your sprint, or to get that refinement going.
So what are your thoughts actually, now you're saying that, so people are more distant and therefore once the option is given to collaborate, then we kind of have to force them. How does that actually affect quality? So what is the outcome of this changed work ethic, if you can say so?
Yeah, for the people who joined the tutorial, they know that shifting left, I think, is very important because it adds quality to the entire sprint. It aligns everybody to focus for those 2 weeks that you go back to your home office. So I truly believe, and I also coach the teams to understand that getting together and aligning, asking those questions is much easier to do in a room than in a virtual call where everybody is a 2D face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So one thing that I've noticed in the calls, also myself, is that, well, there's a lot of them, obviously, especially if you're in a managerial role, is that the people's focus time on the call, on the issue at hand, is actually like distracted because you have your whatever 4K screen or a few of them, and well, there's so many chats and so little time, and you know, and there is a call going on at the same time. You're supposed to collaborate, but people are zoned out because they are multitasking. So, well, we all know how that affects quality, but how does that affect people's well-being?
I think that people's will is still there. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think everybody is still a hard worker and keen to do their work, but maybe that's also the distraction. What I also catch myself doing is if a discussion is going somewhere in a direction that I don't think I can contribute with, I might also see that other screen that might need my attention. So sort of multitasking, which is basically not doing the other task. It's not the will not to contribute, but yeah, you're more easily distracted in a meeting room if you have people just pulling out their laptops. You say, well, you know, we're here together, right? We're going to talk amongst ourselves. And instead of, that's not something, you can't close your laptop when you're in a Zoom call, at least.
There's a lot. I think a lot about this with focus and distraction and so on. Because sometimes I find myself like I'm in a call and they're like talking about something. I guess they're going to go on about that thing again. So I actually do some work on the other screen and so on. But like, oh, you're more focused if you're there. No, I'm not. Like, if I'm in a meeting and they ask drone on about something that I'm like, why are you like? Maybe this should be a different discussion, and I'm sitting there and I don't either. I say that, but also otherwise it's like my mind is gonna wander off, and I'm gonna wonder like, is it this or is it this or is it this? What are they talking about? Like, so I will still not be focused and there. If I'm at home, like, what's that thing? And I Google and I look at their wiki and like, oh, so we're doing this thing, or like they're discussing something, and I go, no, the answer is no, because I actually looked it up because I have a computer right there. So I'm not on board with the whole thing that you're more, that you can shift off to other things is just a negative thing. And another thing I was thinking about is that the scheduling has been kind of different, because usually you run like, oh, you're scheduled like one meeting, and they're like back to back, and you need to get up and go over and like maybe have a bio break, and then you have to get to the other room where another group is combining together. And when I'm in a meeting, I can switch over immediately. At first, thought that was just a good thing, because like we can have the proper meeting time, and when we're done, we're just out. We just close the call and we're out. That happens more. But also, like, you don't actually have the time between to actually, like, often you don't have the time between to actually think about things when you're walking away from, about the thing you said, and like you have the closing things afterwards. But I've realized now that if some people are on site and they have to actually go up and leave and go to the other room, and most of us aren't, we get that little 5 minute between. So yeah, take a note, maybe we should look that up. And like, what are the follow-up actions? So we still we need to have that 5 minutes in between.
I think we got a hint yesterday, didn't we, about this half an hour follow-up period after every meeting.
Yeah.
So I think it was pretty clever.
Yeah.
So let's try to get back to testing, and QA. So one thing that I've noticed in let's say recent years, that the expectation of a person in quality assurance is, quite frankly, they've raised. It's like you're supposed to be like a Swiss Army knife. You're supposed to be a developer, you're supposed to be a requirements analyst, you're supposed to be a DevOps engineer, you're supposed to spin up environments in Docker containers. and so on and so forth. Even if I look at yesterday's talks in the main room, then there was quite a nice bunch of new tools, and in the past I would have called these more like developer tools. However, now it's part of the Swiss Army knife of a QA engineer. So what are your takes on this? Is it too much we are putting on people in this role, or is it time to kind of start splitting it apart? Your thoughts?
I see ads for what, when I'm in an assignment and they say, oh, we need some more testers, and we're putting out this ad, and I look at it like, no, you don't need that. This like, if you're asking for this, people will not apply, or like, and you will miss the people who have the skills you actually need. So I think it's still a mismatch of people don't know what they need and what skills are needed to be a good tester. Some good things are like, often if there's a new tool, well, if they have if you look at like a testers and have a lot of things they know already, they can learn the new stuff. You don't have to already know it. So I think it's still, people don't know what testing is and what you need to do it well.
Still, people don't know that, even though it's a 40, 60-year-old industry.
I mean, they keep putting new people in those positions who try to pick them out.
There you go. Okay, Corina, what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's two sides here. So first of all, people or the companies need someone to test the product, right? How you test the product, sometimes it's up to you. Sometimes you have a clear job description that tells you, what your role as a tester is. But in some cases, you need to be as independent as you can. You don't want to always rely on your developer to provide something for you, or always rely on your DevOps to provide something for you. Either you have them provide, let's say, some scripts for you to run, just something that you just click on and everything starts up, or you have to invest more time for you to learn how to do those things. So I think you do need to know a little bit more than just how to test something, but at the same time your focus should be on testing. So all of these things should be kind of a little bit like an appendix, let's say, to the document, so something that's extra from what you're doing. And it depends on the organizations, honestly, because I've worked recently in quite a few organizations where we have the role of a manual tester, we have a role of the automation engineer, and then again, depending on the company, the automation engineer either comes up with their scenario themselves, or somebody else just provides the scenario and you just write the code. So I think it's a very large world. There's so many companies out there. There's such a mix of understanding what a tester is supposed to do. So I think you as a professional should just know what you want to do, what is your limit, like where do you want to go? Do you want to be able to create all of these scripts and do DevOps and so on yourself, or not? And if you don't, you just should look for those roles that don't require you to do that. And then you have somebody else in your team that can help you with those tasks if they really need to be done. Otherwise, if you're open to learn more, I always say, it's not a bad thing to be aware of more things. To learn about more tools, because that opens up new possibilities for you in the future. You never know when you want to work for a certain company and that certain company has certain requirements. So maybe it's a good idea for you to at least have a hint about what those tools are and those approaches, so that you can get hired and learn more if you are in that role at some time. That's what I think.
So Martin?
I like your view on that, because I think the tester, whatever skill set you bring and what brings you here, is in essence a curious mind. So exploring those tools might also bring you to a new area of testing or software development maybe that can add value and quality to teams and software development projects. I see myself as a generalist, and I've touched upon many areas in testing, and I liked performance testing when I got into it, right? But I would not call myself a technical tester per se. I've set up test automation tools and I've played around with many. I don't call myself a test automation engineer, but I know the best practices and know which tool to use because I used many, right? So I think that curious mind helps projects and companies get better. Where I think we as testers should be is being the test specialist in a team, whatever you bring to the team. Are you coming from a developer background and are you more technically inclined? you might be able to help out with test automation frameworks in the unit test sphere. But you might also help your more manual testers get into test automation. So having a test specialist, test expert in your team, I think that is the value that we should add, regardless of the tool sets that you like to use, the tools that, or skills that you like to employ in your projects. So I think our role and our space is so versatile. I've seen many people come from different backgrounds, different experience into, but also exit the tester realm. I think it's very interesting to see because it brings many different individuals to the same space of quality and testing, and that's what I like about this.
And that ties back to what I said, that people don't, like, you can come from so many different backgrounds and go in and become a good tester with your own profile and what your own, like, you tie over to some other field that you know, and that's what people don't want. They say, oh, we want a good tester, and they think there's a profile for that.
Yeah.
And there's not. Like, no, I have this background, so, and then I have this. The rest you will have to adapt to the situation anyway.
So you can't put the tester in the box. Yeah.
No, it's not. No, you can't that way. Well, a good tester is a good tester is somebody who like knows enough of those, like the new technical stuff, or is aware that, wait, there's a thing for this. I don't know that, but I know there's, like, I should look this up. Maybe know the terms for it, or know that I can ask a developer and who will do this easily. Or ChatGPT. I'm sorry to break in today. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
You can start your bingo now. So
yeah.
Covered.
But so, and like, I'm sure there's going to be some questions about replacing testers. But I say something that ChatGPT is rigged for is generating data, test data, because it looks pretty much all the same and just follow a pattern. That's great for us. So we don't have to do that. Also, how do you do a server? I just want a server. Give me a server, and say, oh yes, and then I can fill it in. You don't need to do that. You don't need to know that unless ask developers and build rapport. If they don't have time for you right now, go to ChatGPT. It also scares them a little bit, but then you can fill in the other things, like, so you can have something easy. But otherwise, no, I think it's you have the extra skill set outside something that's useful. Like if you come from banking, that can be you're extra good in some assignments, and others, that's interesting. It doesn't really matter in some points. So who's the good tester?
Okay. So talking about, let's not get on the slippery slope of AI.
No.
I actually wanted to zoom a little bit out, and all this, let's say, all this technology that has pretty much landed on the whole software development domain overall. You've got microservices, there's containers, etc., etc., and there's a lot of focus on test automation and automated, like feedback loops and etc. And looking at it from product side, what I see is that there's a lot of focus on these micro things, microservices, quick turnaround times on these tests, and but if you look at it from an end user perspective, then any service that an end user uses actually contains easily like 20 to 30 different microservices and applications and external vendors and different layers of infrastructure. And when you're looking at quality assurance, then it seems that quality assurance is only focused on the Lego pieces, but nobody is looking at the building as a whole. So what is your thought on that and how this can be fixed?
I look back at a project where they moved from a monolith to microservices. And the funny thing is, I also look back to my history as a tester, where I started off as a manual tester, and you look at the small systems, but somebody had to have the helicopter view of this is the whole system, the whole project, the whole software package. Breaking it up in microservices doesn't necessarily make things too or more complex. I think it identifies the different functions of a monolith just better. So keeping a scope on that, I think it's really important. Knowing how to test those individual parts and identifying which piece needs to be tested which different way, I think breaking it down in smaller pieces might make it easier to identify that. If you're testing, I really liked yesterday's talk about the financial testing, because the monolith to microservices project that I did was in the fintech industry. Testing payments is something that I did, and there's ways to go about that. That was discussed yesterday, so I won't repeat all of that. But there's also a lot of risk and compliance there, so you need to do an audit. There's things to do, but you can focus then on a very specific microservice. So I think it makes things maybe less complex because it's just out in the open what the application needs to do. So that helped me at least identify the risks and make a test plan.
I partly agree, but I mean, when you break something out to microservices, often you can view it that it's refactoring. So like, oh, both these services use that thing, so we break that out as a second service. So that's now you have 3 entities instead. Yes, but there are 2 features still. So you need system A and the thing you broke out, and you have system B and the thing you broke out.
Sure.
Yes, the thing you broke out, well, you can test it, but it doesn't do anything for the customer. And same thing with A, but the A and the thing. So all of a sudden, there's still a complex thing, and then you have to map this out. And that's where I think people don't realize, no, like we separate dependencies, so it becomes simple. And well, those code things get simple, but like if you want to see what what you're actually building, what's the use value, you still need to see the whole thing. And separation of concerns means that often you people don't actually map the things out. So no, we just need to work on this thing. It doesn't concern us. Yes, it does, because somebody else is also using that. So it still gets complex, and well, it ties back to observability. So yes, you need to be able to observe, like, if I change this, what will it affect? Would it affect? And that's still lacking. I think we need something we must see more of in the future is actually good ways of visualizing how systems are set up, so you see the dependencies, and we will find some scary things there. It's my prediction.
Thanks. Corina,
Yeah.
your thoughts?
I would probably translate this a little bit differently. So I think like the question was, do we test the microservices, but we don't really test the entire product? Is that correct? So we're not that focused on the feature that we're trying to build. We're focused more on all the bits that come together in order to test that feature. And I do hear this a lot in the community, that we're only writing automated tests for our backend services. We're not really focusing on the UI testing because UI testing is flaky. Well, first of all, let me just tell you one thing. It doesn't have to be flaky, because a flaky test means one of either 2 things, let's say. Either you didn't write the test properly, or you have some environmental issues so that your test is perfect, but your test fails from time to time because of some infrastructure issue. Well, fix the infrastructure, and there you go. Beautiful tests. But if you don't test the product as a user would, if you don't have automation for that, how do you know the product is going to work? It's okay that you're testing all of those bits, which can work perfectly, but if you have, if your page is not rendering, if you're throwing or if you have some exception that just makes everything look weird, it doesn't matter whether the microservices are working, because the user doesn't care, User wants to see their nice page, they need to be able to perform whatever they want to, like to shop for something really fast and so on. So if they see that, the page is not what it's supposed to be, they're going to leave your site and go for someone else. So I think there's a little bit of a lack of testing the end product and also testing in production. Because I know we have many companies where we say, okay, we're going to do automation end to end, and we're going to run that automation in all of the dev environments, staging, but not in production. Let's not touch production, because we know for a fact that if we test in staging, production will work fine. And in so many cases, that is not true, because we do have different settings in test environments versus production. We never have an identical test environment to production, like ever. We don't have the database to have all the data. We don't have all kinds of services. They are too expensive to use in a test environment. So we're not exactly testing the end product unless we are testing it in production. So I think this is something we should all focus on more. Test in production. get test accounts, do whatever you need to in order to make sure you have the capability to behave like a user in production and see whether the end product actually meets the requirements and meets the quality standards that we want to use in our company.
I want to add to that also that I'm still using apps left and right every day. So, but still, if I find a lot of bugs and like, oh, this isn't really working, and I try to look for how can I report this to them. I just tell them that thing doesn't work, or take a screenshot and try to can I add this somewhere? No. So I mean, people will want to help you, and I think it's going to be a cultural thing that, oh, I added a thing here, maybe gamify it somehow, make it easier for the end users to do it. Like in a decade, there will be a new culture of people like, oh, I added this thing. It's not like, oh, I added another thing to I connected it to my Instagram. No, it's going to be, oh, I added this thing. I have a badge somewhere because I'm good at testing. Or something. Oh, maybe not that. I don't know.
That's pretty ironic, isn't it? Because you have all seen these sideline 8s with feedback loop, and somehow most apps forget to add the feedback loop in their own app.
Yeah. Also tracking, like how do people go until how do people navigate and go around until they actually find the thing they end up at? You can do that. You've been able to do that for 5 or 10 years. I've been aware of it for 5 years, but I don't see people using it.
It's interesting that you say that, because that reminds me of observability, but then in production, right? Generating data, but not only in your app. Those heat maps, I think Hotjar is one of the tools that does that, has been doing it for a while. Gather that information of how your app is being used. Those are test cases that you probably couldn't have thought of. The user is an enigma. We don't know where it goes, right? I worked at a company that was monitoring the Facebook and all the socials of that company, because we knew that if we had a new release and then something was broken, that's where people went first.
Yeah.
Hey, my app's not working. The App Store review, if you're working on an app, monitor that closely when you are releasing, because that's where the new issues can be found. So I really like that you both also agree that we also need to look at production. Yeah.
And I also want to make a comment, because this is something that, it's a little bit frustrating. Sometimes you work for a company that says you're not going to test in production, you are not allowed to touch production. We assume the risk, so if something happens, you are not liable for it, okay? So then you go to production, you test it in test environments, everything was fine, and in production, poof, you have the bug. And then somebody comes back to you and says, why didn't you find that bug previously? And it's so frustrating to always have to say, okay, first of all, everybody said it's fine to go into production like that, and whatever happens, nobody's going to be blamed for that, but actually you are blamed for it, right? And secondly, I tested in a test environment, but I couldn't find that issue there. So then, this is problematic for you as a professional, because you want to do a good job, you want to have quality, but you have this block that you cannot go past because you're not allowed to test as the real user would. And yeah, unfortunately, in some cases, there's nothing you can do about it, but quit the job, probably. I mean, that's something I would do, because, it's giving you a bad vibe, and it's not the way you want to work. You want to make sure that your product is the right one, because, that kind of makes your salary come to you every month, so, yeah.
I need to, it's something that we need to raise, I think, is something I've said before, and I said it again. If a test is flaky, or something like, oh, this is stage environment, it works the same as production, and then it doesn't. Oh, why didn't you do? Well, all of a sudden, your test didn't work, so maybe it didn't give you information. Yes, it did, because it's flaky. That's also, it's one of the results we don't really consider a result, but that means we found there's another factor somewhere that you are not aware of. Mm-hmm. Something matters between production and staging. Or sometimes it works. Why? Maybe it's your test, and then you check your test and it's fine. Well, there's something else. Yes, sometimes. That's scary, isn't it? Is there a shark in the water? We just don't see it? What could this happen at a critical time? We need to find out what that is that makes it flaky. Because if we can make the test on flaky, hey, we found the thing. Now we know much more about what could go wrong, and we can write better tests. Yes, better tests, good, yeah, but also we found a thing that we weren't aware of what we were doing. That's very important.
I just quickly wanted to respond to what you said, Corina, that in some companies you're not allowed to test on production, right? I think that's very scary as well. But I also think that we have a responsibility as test experts to explain why this is so important, right? So please listen to Corina when we say that testing in production is really important, and bring that to your company if this is a discussion, right? That's the value I think we need to bring to companies.
And log the times when it happens, so you remember next time it happens. Why did we do this? Like, okay.
Yes, but speaking about authority, if we draw parallels from, let's say, more regulated industries or simply older industries in some cases, so say software development has been forever compared to construction for some reason, maybe because it's like 4,000 or 6,000 years old activity, and by now we should have figured this thing out. And however, when you dig deeper, then you will quickly find that, especially if you're on the buying side of any construction project, then please raise your hand. How many of these are on time and on budget? Maybe we have the wrong. What is it called then?
Analogy.
Wrong analogy. Yeah. Maybe a wrong benchmark even. And if you look at any statistic on big complex projects, especially construction, there is easily you can find statistics that they are over budget 64%. So if somebody pitches you a new subway tunnel extension and it's going to cost you €1 billion, then most likely the actual price will be €2 billion, if you factor in all the inflation and everything else.
And so, 2 years later, they're going to change the width of the tracks and also which power you have in the...
Yeah, well, welcome to the software industry.
Just make a small detour around, so just change the...
My question there is really if you look at any other more regulated industry, be it aviation or nuclear or even construction, there you have a very clear split of responsibilities. You have somebody who's responsible for building the thing, and you have somebody responsible for checking the thing and kind of signing it off. There's a assigned power and a assigned veto right. So what can we do in the software industry about it? And should we?
I was at Agile Testing Days US. I was a speaker there, and I spoke about this topic. Well, not specifically, but I talked about having software teams, many software teams in a very large corporation, and to facilitate the process, because it's easier, they had a release team, and the release team was responsible for putting all the software live. So there was somebody signing off on our work and the work of our peer teams. How do you align that, and is that good? My answer was there's different incentives for companies to do this. In construction, it might be law, but it's also less flexible than software. If we build a house, it's less easy to shift it just a bit to the left because it's easier for the user, right? So I'm happy that we're able to work in Agile and Scrum and in a fluid sphere of construction. But yeah, for the teams, it might feel like slowing down, but there's an incentive for the company to decrease risk, to also make the operation for teams easier to do, because deploying worldwide for a small team of 6 people to manage that is a big overhead, right? So that's why there's a separate team doing that, facilitating that. I think you need to look at your organization and see where the need is to make sure if those checks and balances can be done in the team, or if you need the help of another team to do, for example, performance testing, security testing. Maybe it's an outside company that needs to help you with that because there's law in banking, for example, right? So it all depends, but I'm happy that I'm not in construction and not in such a strict way, and I think that's also how we can adopt our way of working, style of working, but also grow our teams around what we need. So that's one way I look at it.
Well, I always come back to that. The analogy with construction is flawed. It looks like it, but it is flawed. When people went from building mechanical things to electrical things, it's still held because you're building a physical thing. But software, we're not building a thing. We're designing it. It's just a design. Not just it is a design, not an actual construction. We're not building a thing, and we. It's not that we build a thing and then we check it. Okay, was it good? Was it put together correctly? No, that's the compiler just put it together. So instead of people constructing a house in a year, that's the compiler and does something. And then we find what the product is. But what we're actually doing is we're checking the design, and that's different from checking what the product was. So if something is, we come up with, oh, we actually have to change this, then we iteratively always change the design. You can't change the design of a house. I mean, you can add a new room or something, or like build something extra, but you can't actually, oh, we're just lowering the floor or lowering the roof or something else. We don't.
Can I argue with that?
Yeah.
Actually, I mean, process of designing a house, and it's very iterative, I have to say.
Yeah.
So raising, floors, moving things around. So this stuff happens, and it happens actually very iteratively and very collaboratively.
Yeah. So that's the analogy to software. What we're doing when we're developing a product, that's that part. Then we don't really actually construct anything, or maybe just build that. We can do that. It doesn't take any time. It doesn't cost it. Like it's just the compiling and shipping. That's a different part. But actually, all the work we're doing, and we're going into meetings, and what we're doing here, that's the design and redesign and redesign.
So we should be comparing software industry to architecture instead.
Yeah.
Okay. That's an interesting thing.
And then we're misled. Yes, we have architects. No, they're all architects.
Corina, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I have a few things here. So first of all, I am someone who is a tester who has built a house. And let me tell you, it's really bad. I mean, you are the one who is going to check every single detail, and when you're, on the construction site, you're going to ask all of the questions, and everybody's like, what are you talking about? No, it's straight, and then you see that it's like this. So yeah, Or you're the one person who finds, when everything almost is done, that, when they need to put in the interior walls, there was actually a defect on the plan that was signed off by 3 other people and so on. So it's a nightmare. Just have somebody else do the house and check it out for you. But if I were to compare, or if I were to look at a domain that I think is very interesting and that we have many things to learn from, it's aviation for sure. So as I said, I've been working in that domain. We did build software for a certain area of aviation because there's a lot of things going on there. And I had the opportunity to do a training with some of the people who were, again, doing some other things in aviation. And I was shocked by the way those people work. They have checklists for everything. So they don't just go off script and decide, oh, today I want to do it like this, or I want to do it like that. They know that in order to obtain the product, they need to follow particular steps, And it's the same with takeoffs and landings, right? A pilot won't just, open the flaps whenever they want to and stuff like that, because it's chaotic. So they learned a lot from the industry from the past 60 years. They applied best practices in a form of mandatory steps to do. And we can use the same approach in some areas of our work. For example, for releases, I think that whenever you are doing a release, there are some steps you are supposed to take. And depending on the project you are working on, you see that that's not necessarily the case. I mean, there were cases when, for example, we wanted to go to production with a list of features that we worked on, and nobody checked whether the build that we wanted to deploy had only those items we finished, so that were signed off by QA, only those items we said we were going to put in production, and so on. So had we had a checklist like, okay, somebody generates the change log, somebody reviews it, and so on, it would have been a different story. But many times we just do things by ear. We don't really have processes in place to achieve the same result every single time we're performing an activity. So I think, as I said, aviation is a domain we should look into, because what they do there is looking at every issue that they have, learn from it, and implement new procedures so that something like that doesn't happen again. And for us, I don't think it's like that. For us, it's just, yeah, we'll see. I mean, if we have a bug in production, we'll fix it. If we have downtime, no problem. We'll put a splash page and we'll be back. And we'll lose some money, but, that's it,
We're agile.
Exactly, we're agile. So, yeah, how about we kind of, improve those processes and fix them and, make things easier even for ourselves.
That's why we have retrospectives, right?
Yes. Do we ever follow up on our actions?
That was a long silence.
Oh, well.
So to close things off, then there's always the slippery slope of us all losing our jobs to AI, yeah? And very, very quickly, since it was promised in the panel discussion that we have to touch on this, let's touch on this. So what do you think is going to be better with all the tools that are, have kind of jumped into the general public's consciousness over the last year? And what things do you think are going to go for the worse? So give your take.
If you ask for something and it produces what you want, you will, and that goes much faster like that. And so that, I want an app that does this and this and this. And you think, well, that's not really a good idea. Oh, we want to, okay, build the thing. You will get the feedback loop so much faster. And then, yeah, that was a bad idea, and we said so. So actually, I think this will put a pressure on people who are like asking for the things and says, so what do you want? Do you want this thing? Do we want this thing? Because they can get the thing, and then we will realize sooner that it actually doesn't do what you want.
So we will make mistakes faster.
Yes.
Okay.
So and some people will learn faster.
I think we can use AI for inspiration. We actually tried it out and put it forward to ask, please build us some test automation, first asking the BDD examples. It worked. But I also see an analogy of testing my test career 20 years back, 15 years back. Everything was a black box. We didn't really understand the internet and software applications. We've got to a point that there's many tools and inspects. But now AI, again, is a black box. We don't know what the machine is doing. So how are we going to test that? I think eventually there will be tools to also inspect what it has done so we can test it again. So that, I think that's an interesting repeat cycle.
I don't think we will be able to see how we figure it out. We can possibly, with statistics, see how biased it is for something or not.
That's roughly what I mean, yeah.
Korea?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that we don't trust our developers to change 2 lines of code, but we would trust a box that gives us the answer to everything we never knew about, So I just have one word for you, Skynet. So, yeah. And, I think what happens is with our society is that we become more and more dependent on all of these technologies. Like I've seen recently, like in a bus where we had to travel for 2 minutes and a child was not even screaming, just a little bit, yeah. And the parents immediately, shoved the phone into the kid's face. So like, take a look at the phone, As a youngster, you start doing this. I'm just going to look at the phone all the time, and I'm not going to look around me, I'm not going to observe, the people around me, the architecture, the scenery, and so on. So I think, and also because we have all these phones and all of these apps, we don't use our brains as we did before, Like, we are becoming a bit dumber, so to say. We don't struggle with the same things that we did previously, Like, who here knows what a map is, and who here remembers how difficult it was to find how to go from A to B using a map, Yeah, a few of you, right? So that was interesting. That was a challenge. You solved the challenge, and it was really rewarding for you. But now you just open the app, and it gives you everything you want. So, okay, it's going to help us. AI is going to help us, going to fix all of these problems for us. Then what are we going to do with our time? Just think.
That's the big question that we will conclude with. What are we going to do with our time? And thank you all to the all panelists. It's very interesting.
Thank you.
So I know what you will be doing with your time for the next half an hour. you will go to the coffee break and talk to people. So enjoy, and we expect to see you back in the talks in half an hour. Thanks.